The content, views, and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the producer and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the City of Bremerton, BCAT, their officials, or their employees. In America today, far too often we hear talk about need as if it were merely a number, a percentage point, a poverty line. But need is not abstract. It's a parent that's trying to keep the lights on. It's a veteran with nowhere to turn. It's a child walking into a classroom hungry. For over 60 years, Kitsap Community Resources has existed as a lifeline not just for one type of person, but for an entire web of lives, too often caught between survival and silence. Across neighborhoods, generations, and zip codes, their work touches the invisible moments that shape our collective lives. Childcare when there's no one else to call. Housing when stability feels like fiction. Warmth when the winter says otherwise. They're not just filling the gaps, KCR is holding stories together. Ladies and gentlemen, this afternoon we are honored to sit down with our following guest. He is the Executive Director of Kitsap Community Resources, and he is here not just to illuminate us to what KCR does, but to ask who they are. Who do they serve? Who gets missed? Who holds that line when systems fail? And most importantly, what happens when a community begins to believe that support isn't a handout, it's a human right? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today on this very special episode of Afternoons with me, your host, Ash Black. Let's meet our special guest, Mr. Tony Ives. Tony, thank you so much.
Hey, Ash. Thanks.
Thank you for being here.
Me.
So you are the Executive Director of Kitsap Community Resources, KCR as it's more fondly known within our community. And for those who might still be unfamiliar, could you describe KCR's mission? I did think maybe you should do it in one sentence, but I would love to know why you use that one sentence.
We do so much, right?
Yeah.
But, KCR is committed to creating hope and an opportunity for Kitsap County residents that are mostly low income, and trying to provide resources to lift up and sustain lives.
You guys have been around for over 60 years. How has that role of the organization evolved in that time? And the needs in our community, how have those changed?
Ash, do you know what a community action agency is?
Well, tell me.
So let's start there. So we don't exist in a vacuum. So we were essentially created by the Department of Commerce back in 1964, 1965, right?
Yeah.
So the idea of community action has been around, and the idea of it is to eliminate or reduce poverty. And so this has been a long mission nationwide. Here in Washington State, there's 30 of us, 30 community action agencies, and across the country, there's about 1,000 of us, right? So KCR, here we are in Kitsap County. We are 60 years old, and we're celebrating this year that and a celebration. Hopefully that will be in October. So our Head Start program is celebrating that, and weatherization, and services for unhoused, our Meals on Wheels program. I mean, we do a lot that connects lives and helps sustain families across Kitsap County, but not just across Kitsap, because we connect with the other counties as well because of the network.
Who do you guys serve? And more critically, who do you worry might still be falling through these cracks? And I preface this question with a little information that I don't share too often, but I myself have received help in the past from KCR. And so I think it's really important that we highlight that fact, who you serve. And I am really interested in the numbers, how you've been able to help, but I am also curious, in your opinion, if there's anybody that's being missed, and what more we could do to help them.
Okay, can we show a chart first from 2024, I believe? Because I want to talk about the numbers. So, we serve veterans. A lot of people don't know that. We have a kinship care program. So grandparents taking care of their children, right? For housing, our weatherization, we've served 6,700 people. This is just in 1 year. For our Head Start program and other programs related to kids, 1,800 kids, right? All together, 3,500 families, for example, for our housing program, 17 youths that we've mentored with our mentorship program. I mean, our Meals on Wheels, 133 meals last year, 133,000 meals, right?
Yeah.
This is stuff that you can get excited about, and people need that. It's emotional as well. So,
do you feel like there's anybody that's being missed? And
folks fall through the cracks. I'll just have to say, many folks don't even know that we exist, and it's surprising being in this position. And I like to talk about community action.
Yeah.
And most people don't know what that is. That includes the politicians and our legislatures. I always try to educate. This is what community action is. This is how important funding is. And so when you're talking about missing the underserved, you can speak to communities that don't have English as their second language, right? For whatever reason, they don't come to us, or there's fear. There are folks that are unhoused that are just about to become unhoused. One paycheck can put you on the street with your kids. There are seniors that, for whatever reason, all of a sudden they're unhoused, or they need a meal and they don't know about us, right? So kids, foster kids, aging out of the foster system. Nobody talks about that. But with the help of our consortium and our partners, we try to facilitate that assistance.
I think all of these demographics are really important to touch on, because we've done episodes that include all of these individuals.
Is that
in the
right?
Past. Kids, most importantly. Folks don't realize that there are, children within our school systems that still go home and don't have any food in their refrigerators. Parents that are too proud to ask for help when it comes to their bills because of what their neighbor might consider. And that's why, I have to admit that, this is help that I've sought in the past, because I think it's important that people know that it's not just the poorest in our community. And like you said, there's so many folks that live here within city limits, countywide even, that are existing on just one floating paycheck from disaster. That's a pet that gets injured. That's a sick kid that's missing work because you injured yourself randomly, and maybe you don't even have insurance to cover the medical needs. That's one retiree who's $100 short on their government paycheck what rent is now costing to live in downtown Bremerton.
Do you know what, Ash? The first point that you mentioned were kids. There are kids, there are probably over 300 kids in the Bremerton School District that couch surf or that are unhoused that people don't know about. In Port Orchard, in the South Kitsap School District, it's reflective. There's over 100. And I know this because a church I'm associated with provides clothing and other assistance for these kids, right? So we try to talk to the school districts and ask, and that's why it's important that we work closely with our partners and identify where those gaps are, because that was your question. And kids are fearful too, but they want to go to school.
Well, I want you to know that we mentor in schools as well. And, in the future, I'd like to work with you to kind of help fill some of those gaps, because no doubt there's kids that I see all the time that are, suffering out there. And we don't always have the solution, but, if we work together, I feel like we can help find some answers. So from housing and energy to early childhood and veteran services, KCR wears a lot of hats. What does it take to hold all of those things together every day?
It takes a strong team internally, number one.
Yeah.
It's tough. Our team works hard, and they'll work long hours without really talking about it.
Yeah.
There's a term that floats around a lot, and it's called self-care, and I have to remind myself about it too. But for the folks that are on the ground, I got to tell you a couple stories. You told me one, which was very true, how someone could be happy or sad one day and then walk in and a customer is yelling, right, for whatever reason. I remember out in our parking lot, there was an incident happening, and I saw one of our team members run out, and so I went downstairs and ran out with her, and she was administering Narcan, 2 doses, and then the emergency guys came up and saved the person's life. And she looked at me, she said, "Day in the life at KCR." Can you believe that? And people take that stuff home with them. So that's the first thing. You know, we have a team that everybody thinks that it's their job, but it's more than that, because they believe in the mission and they believe in serving and helping. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, we know we can't do it all ourselves. It's so important to collaborate and to leverage partnerships. And I'm not just talking about the relationship side of this, I'm also talking about resources, because we know we can't do it ourselves. Now, I have to say, Ash, it's almost like we're becoming a model for organizations like the Department of Commerce that are helping us, and that we get to experiment with some things. Or HUD, some things that are happening that are very positive here in Kitsap County, that departmental heads will tell me, hey, everybody's been talking about Kitsap County and how the collaboration is going on here, and trying to duplicate that across counties in Washington State. And it's rewarding to hear that. We're not perfect, okay, but we're working hard for sustainability and to serve.
And it's true. I mean, you know, in an area where our cost of living is, you know, I think the most recent number I read was 15% higher than the rest of the country.
What do you think that is?
I think that is room for that innovation that you're speaking of.
Yeah.
You know, it's an opportunity for us to find ways to find these solutions.
Yeah, cost of living is an issue here. You know, we have the shipyard, and we have folks that live here from Seattle that commute every day.
Yeah. And
so there's pressure on housing and other resources. And, you know, we're not like Pierce County or King County. Our tax base is different.
Yeah.
So we do what we can.
What are the most misunderstood aspects of what KCR does, and people who rely on its services? And when I ask about what KCR does, I think that kind of relates a little to my previous story, you know, about I think people's expectations of what KCR can do when you walk into the front doors there, versus maybe even just knowing the difference between going to the right location. What are the most misunderstood aspects of your job?
So first of all, we're coordinated entry. So we basically, for the county, navigate services.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily KCR, but we'll send a client to wherever they can receive services, if we know of those services, right? So people think we do it all. They think we do window repair because of weatherization.
Yeah.
We don't, right? We do other things. Those are important services. There are great volunteer networks around the county, like Bluebills, that does this type of stuff. So we try to refer folks, but we don't do it. Water, for example, we do energy at LIHEAP, low-income heating and energy, but not water, right? There may have been a time when we did pay water bills, but that's stuff we don't do. So people get frustrated with us sometimes, and but our resources are limited and our grants are limited. We're basically 96% grant funded, which is something that we need to solve.
Yeah. The amazing thing, though, is, even with that being said, your limitations regarding what you can do versus what maybe someone expects you to help them with, you guys do go the extra mile to try to make that connection for them if possible. And I've seen that in person. And, I think that's one wonderful
Isn't
thing
it
about
cool?
your team.
It's cool, isn't it?
Yeah, and no one's getting a no when they walk in the door. They're getting the information to a yes if it does happen to be something that you guys can't help with.
That's the team, and that's the strength of the team.
Tell me, where do you see the biggest breakdowns in support systems across Kitsap County? And how does KCR try to bridge those gaps?
I would say it used to be coordination of information and resources. And even in our own organization, when I first got here, or even a year ago, the biggest complaint was we were siloed. And you can say the same is true for services, resources across the county. We're siloed. That agency does one thing, that agency does another thing, and nobody really knows what we're doing together. So just look at all the resources that we have. You rarely hear that word anymore with our team. And there's a reason for that. It's because we've changed things, and there are a couple of newer team members that have emphasized data and how each office, we know whoever comes through the door in the Port Orchard office, South Kitsap, for example, we know how many people come in for housing, how many people come through weatherization. There's also an assessment that happens, and that's through the work of the Department of Commerce, frankly, with a group called program called Foundational Community Supports. Well, we do an assessment to understand what each client needs. So hopefully, let's say a family walks in and they need services. First, they think we just need rental assistance. Well, let's just do an assessment. Wait a minute, you have a child that's 3 years old. Maybe that Head Start could help with that. Oh, do you need energy assistance? Oh, are you looking to start a business? How about our BEST program? Maybe you can go there too. So hopefully we try to connect services so we're not siloed at all. So I don't know if Ash, have you ever looked at our community needs assessment?
Yes.
Okay, so it's online, and it's one of the most comprehensive needs assessment that we've done together in Kitsap County, right? So over 4,200 respondents, but the top three needs were basically housing, healthcare or access to healthcare, and access to information in multiple languages, right? And that was 3 years ago, and now we're about to start another iteration of that with the health district and with the hospital, Virginia Mason. So we're excited to move forward with that, but it all started with information, with data, and not ignoring the data, and getting a wide enough scope of a census, across demographics, across zip codes, in all of the areas, right? So basically match the census so we can do a statistical analysis and then figure out how to solve it. Not just us, but with our partners.
Absolutely. I've used that data
in
the past for information for episodes. I've also used that in my work, my civic work. I know KMH, Kitsap Mental Health, is a big contributor to that information. And I personally love data. In all the charity work that I do, I think it's so important that we make sure that we're tracking individuals, that we make sure that we get that information so they can find those needs. And I think that's so important.
So even the data is fragmented. And I'll tell you an example of that. I won't cross any lines here, but I was at the new shelter in Port Orchard, and this was yesterday. And Helen showed me around. It was really great, just looking at things, and we were looking at how the data is acquired, and she was saying how exciting it is because what medications are taken, how many children they have, how many animals they have, all of these things, right? How long have they been unhoused? And we started talking about the data. Is that shared with us? Or no, of course it's not, because there are restrictions to that. Said, okay, how would we do that without duplicating information, right? And let's figure that out. Anyway, it's just an example that in our heads we're thinking about it.
We're coming down to our last few minutes, and so I want to...
That was quick.
I did want to ask you, and this is probably the most important question of today, what does KCR need most from the public right now? Not necessarily just in donations, but in presence, partnership, or participation. Like, what do you need?
To be present, number one, and vote, okay? There are too many people, we can all complain all day long, but your voice and your vote matters. That's number one. Number two, I'll tell you what KCR needs, and that's participation in committees. So we have a board, it's a tripartite board, so there's a third elected officials, a third community advocates, and a third low-income representatives, right, that are elected by their communities. But our participation for committees, like program evaluation or mission advancement, I mean, it's hard to find. So that's one thing that we need, and I know other boards need that same thing. Before we finish, I'd like to just mention a couple of things. One of them in particular is the Housing Consortium that we started about 2.5 years ago. We meaning Kitsap Mental Health, Bremerton Housing Authority, St. Vincent de Paul, myself, Housing Kitsap, and the small consortium. And it's taken on a life of its own, where hopefully we have a portfolio of affordable housing projects, from shelters all the way up to affordable housing. And now hopefully we're not competing against each other so much for funding sources. And Commerce knows it, Washington State Finance Commission knows it. So we're on the right track, right? It's pretty exciting.
Tony, thank you so much for coming out today and sharing the mission of KCR and all the important work that you do for our community. I appreciate you so much. And I know there's a lot that we could cover on this subject, so I hope that I can extend you the offer of coming back on the show again here in the future.
Ash, I thought we had an hour.
This conversation.
I appreciate you, okay?
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you so much,
Yes,
all right?
sir.
I'll come back.
What you've just heard isn't a story about struggle. It's a story about the structures that let struggle grow unchecked and the people still willing to stand in the gap. Kitsap Community Resources reminds us that true support isn't just about handing someone a resource. It's about restoring their right to stand tall. Sadly, they can't do it alone, and we have a valuable part to play, whether it's spreading the word, volunteering, donating, or simply paying attention. If this conversation moved you, challenged you, or opened your eyes to something that you didn't know before, do me a favor. Like the episode, subscribe to the channel, and please share it with someone who still believes in building better systems, not just bigger walls. And don't forget my actionable adversaries. You can catch up on all the past episodes of Afternoons with Ash right here on our YouTube channel, and for the readers out there at the Kitsap Smokestack, where we keep the conversation going long after the cameras stop rolling. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep holding the line, and never forget that the strength of a community isn't in how it survives, but in how it shows up for the ones who are barely holding on. This has been Afternoons with Ash. I'm Ash Black. See you next time. You can find all of our episodes on our YouTube channel and catch the live broadcasts on BCAT, as well as all the extras at Afternoons with Ash Black on Facebook.